Book discussion, Somebody's Fool by Richard Russo, a novel. This is a book about American life, a very common, average American town in the Northeast with common, average American people. And in this very average and barely anything happening time place, Rousseau reflects American society at its current cultural crossroads. There is race, there is gender, there is identity, there is poverty, police violence, justice, wealth, inequality, family issues, divorce. There is opportunity and lack thereof. So Rousseau really packages all the big cultural questions that this country is discussing right now. I wouldn't say struggling necessarily, because it's a good thing to discuss these things, and that's what society means, particularly a democratic society. It requires a conversation about issues that affect people. Unfortunately, this conversation is embedded in a political subtone that, in my opinion, renders a lot of these issues almost difficult to talk about, because you immediately have to take a political stance, and then you're back in the bipartisan mess that American politics is currently caught in, and so on and so forth. But I don't want to talk about this too much. Maybe I want to just tangentially come to it. But let me talk about the book first, and then maybe give a give some of my thoughts, my current tied to current events. Let's say let that way. This is not even a podcast. It's May 3rd, 2025. This is Krim Delco. For the year, we're down 30%. The market's down 5%. We're underperforming by 25%. So why are we talking about books? For new listeners, I always like to introduce my book discussions with a, almost like a disclaimer. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. So I think you might ask, well, why are you talking about books here, novels? Because that's what that is actually part of running a hedge fund. So it is not just the pastime of money managers to read books. It is part of the business, and the reason that is very important to us is because we want to come across, we want to bring this point across. Like I said, the purpose of this podcast, hopefully we can inspire people to take this business, this life of a hedge fund manager, not just seriously, but also maybe find better ways to do this. And one way is to read. I mean, Warren Buffett has spoken about this many times. Read, read, read. And I think I agree with him. I don't know if we have the same motivation and the same reasons why we believe one should be reading, and what that actually means to read what. Those are all legitimate questions. For us, reading it's like yoga of the mind. So you embrace a thought process, you embrace somebody else's thoughts, and by doing this, you develop your own thoughts. I believe there is neuroscientific evidence for that. You rewire your synapses, and you really get to develop new ways of thinking, and those ways of thinking help understand the complexity of the world, which is what a hedge fund manager is exposed to. So that's why we emphasize reading, and that's why we do the book discussions. We also do the book discussions to keep our own record, to keep record, kind of like maybe like a diary, maybe something like that, where we discuss we discuss our thoughts, and then maybe we can go back and see what we were thinking during specific times. So Richard Russo, Somebody Else's Fool, it's a very average town in somewhere, I don't know if it's a real town or not, doesn't matter. There are events happening, a lot of things are happening here, but nothing really matters. So it's a very sort of, it's like watching the water, watching a waterfall or something like that. So it's happening, and all the individual molecules, H2O molecules are falling, but there isn't much really going on. There's a couple of stories intertwined. There is love, there is divorce, there is passion, there is lack thereof. But I think what's most important is that Russo, like I said, he weaves cultural relevant topics into the story. So, for example, there is one of the main characters who is divorced. He has 3 sons. 2 of them did not grow up with him, and they resent him for that. And they also didn't have the kind of opportunities that the one son had that grew up with him. And there are some incidents and police and things like that, and alcohol, drug addiction, probably something that we've seen before, particularly coming from places like West Virginia. It seems to be a state that is particularly hit hard with just unfair, just unlucky or unfortunate events happening to people in that state. I have never been there, but this is not the first time I'm reading a novel where things like drugs and alcohol and despair are related to that state. So one of the sons comes to visit the dad and then ends up in trouble. There's police violence, clearly depicted in the novel. I think it speaks for itself. There's not much to say about that. There's racial issues. There's a character, the brother of Cherise. She's one of the main characters. So her brother, who has some mental issues, but also through his mental, because of his mental issues, he's very honest. He's kind of like, he says it the way it is type of person, and he says things like, you don't know how it feels to be black, to a friend who's white, and things like that, things that we've heard a lot in the woke movement. So this is definitely a voice for woke. I would say a good voice. This is not a bad voice. This is, I said in the prelude, I'm going to tie this to the political events that are happening right now, but I want to detach it for a moment and just say, look, I think it's fair to ask questions such as, for example, how do certain people feel about the way they look and about the way they're being treated, or have been treated and they're being treated. These are all fair questions, and they're being raised in this novel. So there's a passage in the book where the author clearly goes into the question of what does it take to succeed in America? And a lot of people say, well, just go and get an education. And then, he says, well, for some people that is not attainable. There's this scene where he talks about the gifted and talented classes for kids. And then he says, well, these kids are gifted. They're being given gifts, such as, for example, violin classes and karate classes and all that stuff. And that's what makes them gifted and talented. And a lot of kids don't have that opportunity, and that's really unfair. So there's an undertone of fairness, of equity. So we definitely have all these woke questions, all these big questions that the liberals in America are trying to push for, and that the opposition, certainly Donald Trump and his voters are, let's say, questioning. I wouldn't say opposing. I think most people don't oppose fairness and don't oppose that everybody's being treated with dignity. I don't think few people are condoning, let's say, the events that one of the police officers is doing or what he's doing in the novel, where he's clearly violent and unfair towards people. So I think this is a lot of common sense stuff, and maybe I want to finish the discussion with why this doesn't seem right anymore, or what went wrong. Because if you read this novel, Somebody Else's Fool, you really come to the conclusion that this is a common sense situation where you say, look, you know, divorces are not good. People should be treated fairly. Racial issues should be discussed. All of these things are common sense. Nevertheless, the woke movement has taken a lot of these issues and, in my opinion, taken them to a point where they almost backfire. You know, Black Lives Matter was about racial equity and fairness and police violence, and it turned everything upside down. And defunding the police increased criminality, actually increased hatred towards racial groups, profiling, made people even more aware of the fact that they don't want to share their neighborhood with other people. Gender issues that also are more tangentially appear in the novel, in my opinion, have also turned upside down. That some of the LGBTQ community has taken their cause too far and, in my opinion, started a power game, which is now leading to a backlash. The DEI movement in universities and corporations has gotten to the point where our corporations and even some universities are openly against it because it's discriminating against everybody else. So there's a lot of, there's a scene in the book where Charisse says that police is about enforcing laws, justice is about law school. Yes, that's true. And then a lot of law schools have taken their idea of justice to a point where it's not about justice. It's about just favoring maybe the formerly suppressed at the expense of the supposed oppressor, and that's not okay, in a sense that you don't want to just revenge the former power game with your new defined power game. So there's a lot of these types of issues that come to mind when reading this novel, or a lot of the liberal, most writers are liberal in that sense. They do write important things. I think it's an important novel. I think Russo's novel is important. This is, he has, I think, more than one novel. It's a trilogy or about American life. So these are important pieces of work that depict a snapshot of time in this country, and certainly have historic value and all of that. And they also raise the point and the interesting question, okay, well, what's going on? Like, why are we not all just agreeing to these things? And the answer is because the people that stand up for these things politically often misuse their power, and that's a bad thing. And therefore, we have to find a way to incorporate fairness and incorporate opportunity and incorporate a society that is less discriminative, in a way that we don't just respond with the same kind of discrimination, with the same kind of unfairness, with the same kind of violence towards groups that have different opinions. So I guess my conclusion is that in the end, what we need is conversation. There's a quote by Voltaire, which is, "As much as I hate you, I will always listen to your opposing views, because that is what makes our existence strong." It is to be able to discuss opposing views. That is the key. To be able to discuss opposing views. This is fundamental. So, and I think Richard Russo's novel contributes to that important endeavor, to have the ability to discuss whether it's gender issues or equity or racial issues. Whether I agree or not, that's a different conversation. But what's important is that I'm having the conversation with the novel and then with people, let's say, on the other side of the political spectrum. I think I'm a Trump supporter. I am also a J.D. Vance supporter. I grew up in Europe. I thought that J.D. Vance's speech in Munich was a big watershed moment in contemporary history when he told the Europeans that they really basically are becoming like the Soviet Union. These are all important things, and unfortunately, they have all rooted actually in all these common sense ideas that we all encompass now with the woke movement, but they went way too far and actually backfired. It's like a boomerang, where we're actually now seeing people who stood for a lot of these things that are depicted in Russo's novel, and they turned it upside down. They wanna, or maybe it's just taken its own course, but we need to find a way to incorporate these values into our society by also maintaining liberty, fairness, and freedom for everybody.